I'm excited to have a guest here tonight by the name of Drew Baldwin. He works down in the Maritzo Ministries in Lynch, Kentucky. Well, that's headquarters. I think your actual stable's probably over in the Cumberland area.
In Partridge.
Partridge, even further away. So, anyway, I am excited about learning more about how you hear God's voice, trusting in Him, moving according to God's timetable. So anyway, I'm excited to have Drew Baldwin here, and anyway, may the Lord speak to you at this time as we hear from you.
All right, good evening. Good evening. Just a couple of things I wanted to make mention of is one.
Your church is absolutely beautiful. I loved getting to hear a little bit about the story and history of it. Then also, as I was getting closer to this area and approaching, I was just amazed. I had already mentioned it downstairs, how many people are here compared to where I come from. There's not as many people. Population is way less. And so there are businesses and cars, and I mean, you have a lot more traffic than we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And then also, just with that is, I was just thinking downstairs and listening to some of the stories and the activities that this church is doing. And I'm humbled to even be here to speak about what and how God is using ourselves, my family, Maritzo Center, our staff, just because I see the way that He's using you guys here in this area too. So if anything, I just pray that I can encourage you this evening with the story that has been given to me, the testimony that I have of our same God, right, with Christ being our same Savior who unites us all. But I want to just tell you on behalf of Maritzo Center that we are just grateful to get to come and share to whoever invites us to speak and get to share the story. And I pray that what we share, when you look at a Hudson Taylor and different people like that have come through, George Mueller as another, is what they desired to do is through their testimony to share that and show how God is a dependable God. How I cannot be the most dependable person for my family or even close friends or even for our church where I come from, but God is most certainly dependable regardless. So if anything that you hear this evening is hopefully just to show how dependable God is, that we can trust on Him, we can lean on Him, we can rely on Him, and that He is sovereign. So on behalf of that, just Maritzo Center, in case you don't know, we have some have been there. And some, when we first started getting going, I guess years ago, got to go down there and see. But we're in 4 different counties in eastern Kentucky. And so we have 20 to 25 staff spread out across those counties that we oversee. There's 4 different nonprofits that we oversee, including Maritzo Centers. Echo, which is the clothing closet, which is similar to what you have downstairs that you're doing, and then a couple others. And then a little bit of my journey to get to where we are with Maritzo Center is that I'm originally from about 30 minutes north of Nashville, Tennessee, and my dad was a pastor at a Greenbrier First Baptist Church, Greenbrier, Tennessee, in Robertson County. And so it's close to 65 as it heads down into the Nashville area. And so that's where I grew up, and then I went to college at Union University in Jackson, Tennessee, which is a little bit Baptist school there, and I actually went to play baseball. Baseball was a thing that I loved at the time, still love. I get to coach my boys with their baseball teams now, and so I went to school in Jackson, and that's where I met my wife, Leah, who is from Jackson, Tennessee, and started working at a camp that's in Macon, Mississippi. And so it was old logging country, flat land, where we used to work at the camp for 3 summers, labored there. And it was there that God planted a desire to use horses in ministry and to work with at-risk children. And so for both my wife and myself. And from there, God then led us to deepen that, I guess, the resources available for us to do that. So we were looking at what to do next. There were some secular models for psychology and things like that you could do, how to work with children and how to use horses or at the outdoors. But God laid on our heart that it needed to be biblical counseling. So we went to get my MDiv, my wife and I say it like it was nothing, but you know, at the time when you're making decisions for your family, even early stages, there's a lot of grappling in your mind and with your spouse or even soon-to-be spouse at that time of what to do next. Lord, what is your will for my life? And it's similar to a question you ask even tonight for your church is, what is your will for our church in this area? What is your will for Marizzo Center in our area? And so I went to seminary at Wake Forest, and it's the old Wake Forest campus. Wake Forest University moved to Winston-Salem, and Southeastern Seminary took their campus, didn't take it, they arranged it. But anyway, that's where their campus is now. And I went to do biblical counseling to have a foundation for the work that we were going to do with children to be the Bible, and then to build off of that is the model that we were going for. And so while I was there, I was preaching. I didn't ever want to preach. My dad was a pastor, and I was like, I don't want to preach. And I just remember having to go with him to services all the time, or deal with the struggles that he dealt with. The whole family deals with it as a pastor's child and family. The struggles that would be there, or just being pulled in different directions in a lot of different ways. And so I didn't want to do that, but as soon as you say that I don't want to, God usually, it's in store, you know. So, now even I'm a pastor of a church, Eola Baptist Church, which is in our area, and I've been there for 14 years now at Eola Baptist Church, while also working with Marizzo Center. And so anyway, went to seminary. There's a little place that they're starting a cowboy church. Asked if I would want to preach there, and I was like, no way. I said, but I'll come visit. And then I started preaching there. So worked there for a few years, and the long or the short is that that's where I found out about Marizzo Center. And that's where I found out that Lonnie Riley, our founder, was trying to start an equine ministry and was looking for a director of the equine ministry. And so I remember hearing about it and then wanting to come look at it. So we did a pre-trip, and I got to come down and see it. At that time, my wife, Leah, and we have 4 children. My oldest is, he's a freshman at Campbellsville University in central Kentucky, which, by the way, he's sending me texts, and I'm texting him. He plays on the men's volleyball team, and they just won their conference championship for NAIA tonight. And so he's all excited, and he has a T-shirt to show it, and he's trying to rub it in my face. So anyway, so it's a joy. That's a whole another side of just walking by faith, is with your children and the things that they experience. But so Boone, he's my oldest. He was just born, and we were trying to decide what is next after I graduate from seminary. And what does God want us to do next? We didn't have anything. We don't own anything. We still don't have anything and don't own anything. There's a nice truck that I have outside that takes a lot of fuel money to fill it up now. And even that truck was provided for us to do the work that we do. And so it's just been a blessing that God would even see that He would meet our need in that way. And so with the equine ministry, we're having to haul hay often, and loads of hay, and so that truck comes in handy for that. But it's not so good for driving 6 hours and then turn around driving 6 hours back in this time. But anyway, so we were coming up on graduation, and we were asking, Lord, what is your will for our life? What do you want us to do next? And I had a buddy who was going to go to do a church plant in Montana. And God had already established like an outdoorsy and Western horse side to my wife and I, that we wanted to use horses in the outdoors and ministry work. And so I thought that was where He wanted us to go, was to Montana to do the church plant. And so it's easy for us to just be like, I'll grab that. That's where He wants me to go, because I can see it and it's tangible. And it looks like it fits what we want to do. So we went as a family and just visited for a weekend, and I think it was April, and there's still a lot of snow on the ground. And my wife was like, we are not doing this. And I was like, no, I think this is where He wants us to be. And so we go back to North Carolina, and the church that we were a part of just a few weeks later was sending a mission team up to do work in that area of Livingston, Montana. And so I went, and my wife stayed back with my son, Boone. And I remember going, and just prior to that is when I had heard about Marizzo Center and knew that they were looking for an equine ministry director. But we felt like that Montana was where we were supposed to go initially. And so I remember I went to Montana. We worked in a little gym area, community gym. There was bathrooms that needed to be redone. So we did a lot of work in there. We did the stalls and the things like that. And I remember sitting on the Yellowstone River in the little hotel that we were in, and the rest of the team wanted to go see Yellowstone. Well, we had already seen Yellowstone just the previous few weeks when our family visited there. So I didn't go. And I remember sitting down and was just grappling with, God, what do you want us to do? I felt like all the weight was on my shoulders as the man of the household, the husband and the father, and the role that God has given me. And you don't want to get that wrong, and so you just are concerned, God, what do you want us to do? And when my this will be videoed, so hopefully they all understand it now, but my wife's parents, when we had said that we thought about moving to Montana, they were not for it. They did not want us to go. She was like, why would you take my grandbaby 2 days away from me, travel-wise, away from me? And so so it caused some, I say that and you can laugh about it now, but it was pretty serious at the time. And she wasn't making it hard on us, but it was hard, because we wanted to please everybody, but you're like, God, where do you want us to go? And so anyway, that process continued, and I remember trying to seek counsel, and I remember my mom would tell me that you don't know where it is yet until God shows it to you. My dad telling me, keep doing what God's called you to do until you see what it is. Sometimes we can be like, get complacent and just kind of sit still and not do anything and continue to wait on God when that's not being faithful to what He's called us to do here. You'll never know what's coming next if you're not faithful to what He's put in your hands now. And I've learned that in many different ways even since that point, but that was kind of a beginning stage for that to be applicable in my life. And so it was a hard time. And I know when Pastor Randy was asking, he said, how did you come to the point of trusting God was the question you kind of formed for me. And I remember thinking of my testimony, and this was part of it, that he had referenced that sometimes there's a trauma or there's something that happens that causes a person to get there. And I don't know that it's necessarily always around a trauma or something significant that maybe we see as would be huge, but I think there are small things along the way that God certainly does in your life that He gets your attention with. And so this one wasn't just a huge trauma as far as when you think about the loss of a loved one or some physical illness that takes place or something like that. It was more of me taking on a role and responsibility that I was realizing the weight of, and then also wanting to make sure we went where God wanted us to go, but how do I carry all these other people with me and them understand where we're headed, right? Not physically, but just mentally in prayer and support. And so there was, in some sense, some trauma in that to make this decision. It was the first huge decision for my wife and I. And so as we were trying to continue to pray through that decision, I was there on the Yellowstone River. We had, at that time, we knew Montana as an option, then we knew Marizzo Center as an option, Eastern Kentucky, leading the equine program. And so I was sitting on the river, and I just wrote an email. It was 2008, moving into 2009. Obama was about to take office. The economy was south, which has been that way, up and down lately, but that time it was pretty severe. And so you're just thinking about retirement, and you're thinking about college fund, and you're thinking about all these things. And the package plan that Marizzo Center offered to us, there's no salary, there's no retirement, there's no insurance, there's nothing. And I don't know, maybe I should have started us off with that to make sure you understand our 20 plus staff received no pay from Marizzo Center. And they're working 60 plus hours, like you could imagine ministry work to be, a week. And so when you go visit Lonnie, our founder, and he tells you, this is what it looks like, this is what we'd love for you to do, and he never wants to work a deal like there to say, so will you come on board with us? He always pushes us away, and any staff that would come, and he's like, but I just told you I wanted to help you, and you said you've been praying for staff, but then you're telling me to go back home, and here's the reason why. It's because it's real easy by emotions to grip somebody's heart and make them make a decision in the moment that's apart from God's will for their life, for life. But when you send somebody away, if God wants them and calls them is what we're looking for, the call of God and not the call of man. But if God wants them to be there, that conversation will resurface in time, no doubt, if we're being obedient. And for me, it was that. So he pushed us away, and then I'm on the Yellowstone River to catch us back up to where we are. And I was sitting in the hotel, and I was on my laptop, and I had typed Lonnie this. I had nobody that I felt like I could turn to at the time, so I just sent Lonnie a message, and an email. And I told him, I said, Lonnie, I just don't know how. And I wrote like probably 2 books worth of information. I mean, it was just like, I felt like I was crying on the email and that he should see it. And I was waiting for this response. It was going to be spectacular and help me feel better. And it was far from that. So I sent him saying, you know, it's a new family. We desire to have children, which we have 4 children. One's in college, one's in high school, one's in middle school, one's in elementary school. And so I said, we want to have children. I just don't know how we can move there and not know about college fund, because everything I had been taught up to that point was, you know, financial advising, which I mean are good things to teach, so don't hear what I'm not saying. But it was about setting up your retirement. It was about setting up so you could have college fund, the savings that in case emergency happens, all those type things. And so we're in the moment where I was living, none of that was in play. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? I have no clue. And so when I was in Montana, I was trying to put a box around God to say, if you say this house, this place, this job, then I'll know this is where you want me to come. So I boxed God in. If you do these things, then I'll do this. And he totally blew the box open. Because as I send that email from the Yellowstone River to Lonnie, he responds back from my 2 books worth of information and just pleading with him with just 1 sentence. And I felt like I was a school child and had the ruler slapped on my wrist, you know. It was like, oh, man. And he basically sent me an email, and he said, Drew, first you have to figure out where it is that God wants you. And if you know where God wants you, you know he'll take care of all the rest. And he was exactly right. And I mean, this is 16 years that I've been with Marizzo Center now, moving into 17 coming. And I still use that as part of my testimony, which changed my thinking. And so it was, we've all said, don't put the cart before the horse, is the idea that we have, and we understand that. And at this point in my life, it was actual reality where I was having to not just say it, but to live it. And to say, okay, God, which really, when you hindsight look at it, it was much simpler to say, God, where do you want me to be? Rather than, can you get this house, and can you give me this much money, and can we make sure that we can do this or do that, and have all these things, where it just took all that stuff away, stripped it down, and said, God, where do you want me to go? And now I feel that God used Montana as that thing for me to teach me. I was seeing if you would go to Montana, and I know that you would, but now here's the plan I have for you. Will you go to Eastern Kentucky? And so I had come back from that trip. Leah and I were praying separately at that time about it, and just really wanting to hear from God separately, knowing that God would communicate the same thing. We also knew that for us to go do ministry together, that if she was divided on it, and I was divided from where she was, and I said, well, I feel like this is where God wants me to go. You pack up your stuff and come with me, whether you want to or not. That's not going to be healthy ministry, and it's actually going to tear away from ministry, because then when something happens while you're there on the field for us in Eastern Kentucky, she could always come back and say, well, I told you we shouldn't have moved here, you know. And so it just, you could see where that could be complicated and divide from ministry work, because if in our marriage it would be divided. And so we just prayed about it. And then I remember it was midnight one night. I had woke up, and I knew at that point that God wanted us to come to Eastern Kentucky. So I wake her up and I tell her, I said, this is where I feel like God wants us to go. And her heart was right there with me too, to say that's where we're supposed to go. And so there was turmoil in a sense, because we were just uneasy and divided in our mind leading up to that point of where it is that God wanted us to go. What did he want us to do? And what is that going to look like? And when the finances didn't match up, the money that was going to come in didn't make sense. There was actually none. And then how to approach that is to say, okay, God, if you want me to go to Eastern Kentucky, I want to be obedient with that. And you are a God who doesn't fail, who is victorious. And if you call us there, then you will not fail, and you will provide for us what is necessary to accomplish what you want us to do. And in that path, we also began to learn there's a difference in wants, which we know this. We try to teach our children this. I'm sure you may too, and even grandchildren, and then needs. And I'm not saying putting God in a place of just the health, wealth gospel and those type things. What I'm saying is if He has called you to do something, He will provide everything necessary for His glory to be seen in that you do. So He will be the provision for us now. Is 16 years later to have 20 horses. We were just talking about that with a few on our equine ministry. We don't charge anything for our camps. Not that we couldn't. I do think there's times where we can train people wrongly to be dependent on the wrong thing, right? And so to have some investment into what they get to be a part of is good. But we don't charge on a couple of the camps that we do have. And so we just do horse rides. Right now they're doing riding lessons, so we have that going. There's 2 young ladies that lead that for us. And we do trail rides for people as they come through. But horses on average are $150 a horse per month when you average them out on a year's time. So then you times that by 20 horses, and that's if they don't have a severe medical issue or some kind of trauma that happens to them that you have to deal with. And there's constant going and picking up hay. And so financially, if you've worked around livestock, cattle, meat market is much more where the money's going to come. Horses are not going to be it. It's not going to be where you're going to make any money. But 16 years for me, and a little over 20 years for Marizzo Center, we've had an equine ministry that God has continued to meet the needs of those horses. And we have learned a lot about nutrition along the way. And the reason is because the horse isn't ours. The horse is God's. The ministry is God's. As soon as we take, like for your clothes closet downstairs and some of the other ministry work that you may be a part of, as soon as you, which I heard you do that down there, as soon as you take ownership of it, you're the one that has to maintenance it. Now, let me make sure you understand. There is an ownership I feel like God wants us to have in the calling, to be excited about what He calls you to invest into it. But if it's about me and self-gain, then it's going to be about me who has to sustain that ministry. And so as soon as I start to run with the equine horses about my name being great, then I realize I can't keep this up because I'm exhausted and wore out and there's another fence rail down or a flood has happened or whatever. But as often as I keep it in God's hands, He will continue to meet the needs of the equine program that we do and say, this is all His, it's not mine. And I heard you say that downstairs talking about the closed closet. So my wife and I made the move in 2009 to move to Eastern Kentucky and then to be the director of the stables of Creekside Glen. And so we have been there for that much time. Since then, it had 3 children born in that area, and it's been a blast to be a part of. It's been hard work, and it's been struggle to be like Abraham and to wake up in the morning and say, God, to the left or the right, where do you want us to go? How do you want us to be faithful today? And there's been moments as our children have grown, like even now with my son in college, that the finances change. And so it changes what we thought we had, we don't have. And you're just looking at it and you're like, how are we going to get through this month? We didn't even make it through last month. And so you can panic at times, which tomorrow morning we'll talk about just the anxiety that comes by way of, that pulls us away from being people who live by faith. So when we were first there, we had maybe, I don't know, it may have been $65. It was under $100 to our name in our account. And we were just working and laboring, and Lonnie came out to the farm and he was working with us doing some projects, and he said, hey, Drew, we had this big Belgian horse that we do carriage rides with. And we would just take it in town and we'd try to use that for ministry opportunity. He said, I got to get this harness. We had to borrow a harness because ours was stolen. The harnesses can be about $1,000 for a pull horse like that. So he said, I need this harness taken back to South Carolina, Aiken, South Carolina. And I was like, yes, sir. I mean, new on staff, you're like, okay, we'll do it. And you're like, but I only have $65 to my name. How are we going to pull this off? And we had Boone, and we were potty training Boone at that time. And we had this little Jeep Cherokee. It was the older 90s model, like the box kind. And we were just like, okay, we're going to try it. And so Leah and I get Boone, we get in the car, we go to Aiken, South Carolina, and we meet the pastor, we return the harness. and they put us up to stay the night in a hotel. And he wanted me to share. It was a Wednesday night, similar to this setup. And he said, I want you to just share what's going on with Merzo Center. This group has been there before. Just let them know who you are, what you're doing on staff. And as I started to leave, different members, they would come and they would shake my hand, and then they would have something in their hand, wadded up, and they would shake my hand. And then I was like, what are they doing? And then I'd be like, no, wait a second. Because from the beginning, what we've also chose to do as a ministry is we haven't asked and we don't do fundraisers. We haven't participated in grants. We have a couple local ones, which is a little bit different, that have been presented to us because we own some city property, or it's part of the city's buildings and things. But we have ownership of it with Merzo Center, so they want to channel money to us to work on those. So we haven't done any fundraisers. Even our individual families don't go and speak. Like a lot of missionaries, they'll have to raise up to $40,000 before they hit the mission field. And so they'll travel to different churches and try to raise those funds. I'm not at all saying that that's wrong. For us, we've tried to do that. And to go back to just praying, God, how do you want to meet our needs? These are what our needs are, and trusting Him to meet those needs. And the other is, I just hate asking for money. I mean, I feel like at times when I do, which I know that we have had two different ways. If you have a kid playing a sport, you're doing fundraising. We were selling ferns, a couple of weeks ago. So I get all that. But on the ministry side of it, if I were to come and say, hey, and Pastor Randy, would you, support my family as we do equine ministry? Kind of puts him in a spot where he may say yes because he feels obligated. And so if he feels obligated, then God's not getting the glory in that, right? But if I just stay back and we just pray through it, and God lays on your heart that you want to meet a need of somebody, an individual missionary, and then God gets the glory from all that. No one feels forced or pressured into a situation. So we've just taken that approach to it. So all that to say, so we're at the church in South Carolina. And as I was leaving, they're shaking our hands. So my wife and I and got to the room, and we had Boone with us. And so we're trying to get Boone to lay down and go to bed. It's just those fun years, when the kids are young like that. And I started pulling what they were giving me out of my pockets. And they had given us like $365. So we thought we were the richest people. We were going to go find the finest steakhouse and go eat something. We didn't, because we have a 1-year-old. But they had given us money that over exceeded what we had in the account. And that's just one, for instance, of how God met our need. I can bring you a story after story where I've seen that throughout. And one as of recent for Merzo Center as a whole is we were sitting just a couple months, or it was actually just a month ago. I was sitting in the office talking to our CFO. Insurance will drop us a lot of times, and we have to get new insurance. And this one, it was because of the farm, because we do horses, we have a little rifle range which shoots pellet rifles and not center fire. But anyway, sometimes insurance holders, they don't like that. And so they'll drop us, and so we have to find a new one. So we have a middleman local that helps us find a new agency. They take us on and so forth. And so we found one, but they were $5,000 more expensive than last year's insurance. And so you're just like, when I've already told you that we how we live, it's every day is, okay, God, how are you going to meet this need for today? And so we were sitting there in the office. I had to bring this news and say they need a deposit on our insurance so we can stay carried for insurance and for the coffee shop that we have as well. And so we're sitting there, and then another one of the staff that's an assistant to me comes in. He says, hey, I got our newsletters, which we were just talking about that. One was mailed up this way, maybe a few. And so it takes like $2,000 to send those out. And so he says, I need a check for $2,000. The winter, maybe for you too, that's the worst time when you're coming out of winter into spring to ask for money, because that's when it's like the lowest. Our peak season picks up about now, and then it gets higher, like you see more money coming through for different facilities and projects, and then winter comes and it drops back down. And plus our monthly bills, like we just paid $8,000. That was just for our electric bills of the facilities in the Lynch area alone. And so you can see all that, and you're like, there's no way. Like if we sit down and we work out a budget and we talk about all these things, you're going to be like, it's not going to add up. We can't do this. Well, you've just told God no to what you said that he was calling you to do. But you told him no based off what you saw, when God's saying, are you living off what you see or what you can't see? And so, man, that's a reality check, right? And it hits me in the gut often. And so I'm sitting there in the office, and we were talking about this, and right then immediately there's my phone vibrates, and there's an email that comes through, and there is an organization called River Foundation that has just made a generous donation to us to exceed beyond the needs that we had at that moment to get us through that moment. And so it was like one of those where you're sitting in your chair, talking to the CFO, we're crunching, trying to figure out what to do. We said, well, God's got this. And then an email goes off, and look at the email, say, you won't believe this. And you're like, there's this much money that's coming through that they want to give to us right now, and it meets all these needs, and you're just humbled, so humbled when that happens. And so that to say that these are experiences that I have had the privilege to have, to see how God has met needs for Maritza Center along the way. And if he meets them for us, I guarantee you have the same stories, and we share those stories. And it may be a large donation that has been given, or some way that God has just met through a physical, like a vehicle, or somebody came and repaired something at your house, or even just the simple encouraging word that you knew you needed today because it was just so hard just to strengthen your faith. But God's activity is constantly there. And it's such a joy to know that it is, and then to say, okay, God, what do you want us to do? And so I wanted to briefly, on top of what I've already said, if I have just a few minutes, in Mark chapter 6, wanted to just share with you a story that you already know and are very familiar with. And this would be to define the word marizo. Marizo is a Greek word that you would probably have a hard time. We've heard it pronounced all kinds of ways. The D is usually left off. They put the D in for pronunciation. But it's a Greek word, and it's found in Mark 6, where Jesus, in Mark 6? He feeds the 5,000. And so in Mark 6, and this is, it helps, I think, bring some of this together for the name of who we are and then how we try to operate. In Mark 6, with the feeding of the 5,000, this is the largest miracle. This is a huge deal and turning point when this miracle takes place. It's the only miracle other than the resurrection that is in all four Gospels. And so we know, and we gather more information from the other Gospels in participation with this one, to know that it was 5,000 men, but that wasn't to also include women. You could assume there was one woman per male, so that could be 10,000. And then you could also assume probably 2 children per 5,000 men, so you're looking at 20 to 30,000 people possibly, right? And so this was a huge event that took place, and they're coming over, and they were going to rest. The people saw them going across to rest on the boat, and somehow they're faster than the boat, and they beat the disciples over there, and they're ready and they're waiting. And then Jesus gets out of the boat, and it says that he has sympathy on them. And so in verse 30 of chapter 6, said the apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest for a while. Which, to pause for a second, I think we would understand this is to be like, yes, today that's what I need, is just rest, right? And so they think that they're going to get rest. One of the hard things in ministry work is to think that you're going to get rest, and then the next thing you know, your phone calls and there's no rest to be had. Well, that's what they're about to experience. As soon as they think they're going to sit down on the recliner, it's like, nope, you're about to feed 25,000 people. And so he goes on, he says, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. He says, for many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now, many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. That's some track stars right there. It'd been neat to have seen that. I'm sure that the disciples, like us, would have been like, oh no, shaking their head in the boat. Verse 14 says, and when he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and it says he has compassion on them Now, we were just looking at the Good Samaritan story in our church on the parables. We've been following through the parables, and it said that the Good Samaritan had compassion on the man that was in the ditch that was hurting. And so when that word compassion, it's a strong feeling that doesn't just stop at a feeling but produces action. And so that's the compassion that we're called to have, to love our neighbors. And then it's also the compassion that Jesus had, not just in this instance, but this instance is pointing towards the cross as well, that He is the good shepherd. He is the bread of life. He's about to feed them. It's a picture of the bread of life, which ultimately goes back to the Old Testament. It's fulfillment of the bread that was near the tabernacle. And He was going to be the bread of life. And so it says that, and He had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And He began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, His disciples came to Him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside, the villages, and buy themselves something to eat." And so when you put all this together, they were expecting to go rest from a long day work already. They get to where they were hoping to find rest, and Jesus says, "We're not done. We got to work." So He begins to teach. And now these guys are like, "Look, the way we term it, my dogs are barking, right? My feet are hurting, and I'm ready to sit down." And they come back and they say, "Let's send them away," because they're hungry. They're going to start getting hangry, and so let's send them away. And so this is a testing of the faith, I believe, for the disciples as well as Jesus tests them. So they say, "Let's send them away." That's the easy way out of it. And verse 37 says, "But He answered them, 'You give them something to eat.' And they said to Him, 'Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?' And then verse 38 says, "And He said to them, 'How many loaves do you have? Go and see.'" So they had in their mind what they wanted to do, and they're missing the fact in this moment, because of whatever has triggered probably a frustration or weariness, that they were just ready for the day to be over, the disciples were. And I can understand that. And there's been days that I absolutely understand that. But at this moment, Jesus is trying to make sure, do you understand that I'm the bread of life? These are a people, a sheep without a shepherd. I'm the good shepherd. I'm going to care for them, pointing myself to be the shepherd to these people. And so at the same time, what we learn from this as well, He says, He's basically telling them, I know that you're tired, but I'm also going to give you the endurance to do what I'm calling you to do, right? So He says, I'm going to give you even extra after this to let you know that I'm faithful. And so it says in go and find, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. And when they had found out, they said, we have 5 and 2 fish, 5 loaves and 2 fish. And He commanded them all to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups by hundreds and fifties. And so to pause of that, the best picture I have when I look at our terrain in the mountains of Appalachia, coal mining country, we have strip jobs that have taken down the trees to get to the coal. And so there's bare mountains in a lot of areas. And they're reclaimed, so they have all this grass that covers the hillsides. And so I picture the hillside like this, and He tells them to go and have them sit down in hundreds and fifties that would equal up to 25 to 30,000 people. That's a lot of small groups. So this is one huge miracle, but it's about to be revealed to be an individual miracle for every single person, a lot of small miracles. And so He has them sit down in these 50s, and He says, in taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, He looked up to heaven and He said a blessing, and then He broke the loaves and He gave it to the disciples to set before the people. And then it says, that last line of verse 41, it says, and He divided the 2 fish among them all. Merizo means divide, to distribute. So the word right there on divide, you also see it in Romans chapter 12, where He divides a measure of faith to the people of God to work among the unity in the body of believers. That's merizo too. So here it is to divide and to distribute. So the way that we have seen Merizo Center is that our job is to trust Him every single day with what He is doing and allow Him to be the provision. And whatever He sends our way, it may be clothes for a clothes closet. It could be cans of food. It has been a lot of different things over the years. It could be, we'll get a call about a pallet of shoes that need to find a home. Can we take them? It could be pallets of water. And so it's always something, but what can we do to be the distribution of God's grace and mercy to the world around us, trusting Him to give us the energy even to do it in the moment when we're weary and tired. And to not let the things of life or the things around us to be the triggers of distraction that would pull us away from being faithful to a faithful God who's faithful to us. And so in this miracle, what the disciples were able to do is they took the basket from Jesus. They go to these groups of 50 and groups of 100. And when they get to these, they hand the basket to the first person. And when they hand the basket to the first person takes food out enough to fill them. And then the basket, they pass it. And again, another miracle, there's enough food to fill you. And then it goes to the next person. And it goes to the next person. It goes to the next person, the next person. Every time somebody reached their hand in the basket for up to 25 to 30,000 people, there was enough bread and fish from 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed the whole crowd. Isn't that awesome? Jesus is the bread of life. Everyone that would turn to Him for salvation and life will have life and salvation in Him. He doesn't run out. So every time somebody puts their hand in the basket of who Jesus is the bread of life, there is salvation to be had. It's absolutely amazing, those who would turn to Him. And so the humbling part is that the disciples got to be a part of that. They didn't perform the miracle. They were just distributors of the miracle, right? It wasn't about them. It's about Jesus, even in this picture. And so what are we doing with the things that God has given us that we can be faithful, even if it's small? Even if you say, you know what, out there it just seems like a rat race, and I can attest to that driving here. I say, wow, there's people moving everywhere. And you say, I just don't know how we can make a big difference in that. That's like the first part of this, of going to God, going to Jesus and saying, you know what, the day is over, let's send them away to go get food. But what if He's given you something that you can make resourceful to the community around you that would end up allowing that person to reach their hand into the basket of Jesus for salvation forever? And that you just get to see that happen. You're like, all right, God, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And this does have no age boundaries. As long as we have breath, there is opportunity and purpose that God has for your life if you believe in a sovereign God, and I do believe in a holy sovereign God. And so the divide, and it says, and they all ate and were satisfied, and they took up the 12 baskets full of broken pieces of the fish, and those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. And then we talked about the extra numbers on top of that. So if there's anything that I could leave behind just by application, a couple things would be just this, and then loved if you have questions to answer any of those that you may have. The first one, like we mentioned, is showing that Jesus had compassion. What compassion is, it means it calls you into action. He wants us, because He is within us, to have compassion on the people around us that moves us to action. Not just to say, oh, I feel for them, and to stay distant, but to actually move towards them in action. And so the first point of 4 within this is what the disciples, for the disciples in this story and for us, is to just start somewhere. Start somewhere. Go and see what you have as far as resources. And that may lead, for us, it led to an equine ministry. It's led to a clothing ministry, a food ministry. We're having a men's Bible study opportunity that has come by way of this as well. And so there's a lot of different things and opportunities that come by way of it. So start where you are. The first point is just start where you are with the resources that you have. Don't think that for the farm and for our camps, I remember that it was under construction. And so you think, well, we can't start camps and serving God until the facility is done. And that's not how God works. He convicted my heart to say, no, you're going to start doing it now and using what I have given you now, and it will develop over time to what I want it to be. So don't think that it has to look a certain way. Well, we got to get the building adjusted. It's got to be just right before we start ministering to people. No, the people are the first priority. He will catch you up on how to even organize the building to fit the need of the people as you learn the people. So start where you are. And then secondly is use what you have. So this goes back to the cookie dough video that we talked about is start where you are. So it's right here. Be faithful with today that He's given you. And then also use what you have, which for Lonnie, it was cookie dough. If you remember and watched the video, he was given a whole bunch of cookie dough. And it was sitting on his porch. He didn't know who dropped it off. He just found it. And so they just started getting the cookie dough, his wife, Miss Belinda, and started making cookies, and they started delivering it to the neighborhood. And that was the starting point of something great, the miracles that God would continue to perform in our area. So what do you have? And then use it, right? And then the third one is do what you can. So start where you are, use what you have, and then do what you can. It was really fun to get to hear downstairs about the Bible study, the phone, I don't know how you worded that again, the phone call Bible study that I think some are doing or have been doing. And that was really cool when I think about do what you can. If it's a phone call Bible study, one person is still worth it. If it's 2 people, if it's 3 people, just be faithful with who's in front of you. Start there. So start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And then also is knowing that Jesus is the multiplier. So in all of that, if we're just obedient to what He calls us to be, He will multiply in His timing. Now, one of the other things that I learned as we were going through the parables is with our church is that some of the things as God moves and what He does, He tells you to sow the seed. What He also tells you is you may never see what He's doing with your obedience to sowing the seed. In your lifetime, you may never see and reap the reward of what's going to happen because you sowed the seed. But it's not for you to have to know that. It's you to be obedient with what He's told you to do and knowing that He can do it and will do it one day. And it's the same true for us. Sometimes we're graced with the reward to get to see something multiply, but just because it's not multiplying doesn't mean it won't if you've been faithful with the action. So don't give up on it too quick to think, well, it's not multiplying, therefore it's not working. That's not God's equation of how the kingdom grows. It grows on His timing, in His way, where you may be long gone. And actually, you're probably receiving the reward of somebody else's labors that is not here to see how it is multiplied today for you. And so just remember that as well. So those 4 things I think are helpful in knowing start where you are, use what you have, do what you can, and know that Jesus is the multiplier. And so our job is just to try to move the needle of lostness, one person at a time, trusting God along the way. Now, I've taken a lot of time to share our testimony and then also where Marizzo Center is, and I hope that this is helpful, but to get your minds thinking for your own area. But I would like to give you a chance, an opportunity to ask any questions if you have any. And that's usually the better place to be. If you do have some, please ask them, because it's usually better to respond. You may have something specific that you'd like to ask that this didn't even touch.
So obviously one end result is seeing people become Christians. Do you see that in most or all of the different ministries that you have going on in Maritza?
Yes, sir. So the question is, if I can reword it, you tell me if I have it correct for you, but do we get to see salvations? Like that would be the goal, right? Do we get to see salvations in all areas, all ministries that we perform? Is that basically what you're asking? And so that meaning from the clothing to the food to the horses and the equine to the camps. And the answer is yes. In some areas we may see a little more, but there's more. Say for instance, the coffee shop may work with, they're selling coffee, but they're also trying to minister to people. But it'll be on a slower scale, and the one-on-one times is where you really have opportunities like that. And so they're at a slower pace, where for us, when I'm out at the farm, we'll do a camp. Our little Buckaroo Boot Camp is for ages 12 and younger. It is vacation Bible school on steroids. It is like kids running everywhere. It's an awesome thing. There's 130 kids that will come to that camp for 3 days and a family night. So I have a larger opportunity, does that make sense, with 130 students in 3 days. And so, but does it mean that I always see someone come to know the Lord? Not always in those camps will we. But we do see them, but it's on God's timing. And so whether it be the coffee shop, whether it be Echo, Celebrate Recovery, we work with drug addiction as well, and do some counseling there. I would say a lot of our salvations we've seen have been there as far as on consistency than anywhere else. But then in the camps, we will see them occasionally as well, or the food pantry and those type things. Does that answer that question? Any other questions? One of the big things that I have learned and try to continue to hang on to is to live a life of response to what God does. A lot of times we get the big ideas, or He'll show you a piece of it because of your skill set, how He skilled you. And so we try to take off running ahead of Him and like, all right, God, I got it now. And you just meet me there. And He's like, no, wait a second. He's like, if I'm the one that's going to lead you there, so you stay with me. And so a lot of times we can try to put something together and then ask God to join us there. And like I had said, we end up being the ones that have to maintenance that because we've run past God. And so we've tried to live a life of response where we continue to operate whatever He brings to the door that day or that season. God, how do you want us to respond to this? Feeling like He's the one that's placed it here. Now, what is our job in responding to it? To not just quickly turn it away, but to say, how do you want us to participate in this need of our community, and what can we do? So that's another big thing. Yes?
I'm interested to know, I assume there are churches in Lynch.
Yes, sir.
Have they been encouraged by your ministry? Has there been some sort of involvement and relationship between the churches and their parachurch organizations?
Yes, sir. So let me highlight because you said parachurch. I want to make sure that we reference that because you're right. We do view ourselves, we're not the church. We are a parachurch ministry. There's a high expectation and responsibility that the church has versus a parachurch ministry. So our goal would be to evangelize and do things and then support the local church that is teaching right teaching with these people that we minister to. So we'd love for the churches to blow up because of things that we do in size, right, in numbers. Then to go back is that initially it was a different time, and I wasn't there during this time when Meridian Center started. And coal mining was leaving, a lot of people were moving out, and then Meridian was coming in and was starting to try to help people. Initially, sometimes when things like that happen, there is an element of jealousy where people don't know how to respond or don't think so-and-so needs help. And so there's some times where we could see some of that. But as you continue to be consistent with what God has called you to, with right heart, right motivation to glorify the Father, that mends itself in time with all hearts involved. And so we have seen a lot of churches have been on board with this from the beginning. A lot of them just sat back and watched us, and they're like, who are you? What are you doing? And rightfully so. And even at the farm, it has been that way. When we first moved there, it took 2 years before I even had a local person drive by and honk at us and wave. So it's just about, and in that area, it's the Appalachian Mountains, which I would say may be similar here, but they want to know that you're trustworthy. And so you establish yourself, and they would teach you this in seminary as well, but take time for you to be known by your church congregation and be consistent with them and trusted before those relationships grow any deeper. And so in that 2-year period for us, when we moved there, which Meridian Center was there before we got there, but even that started establishing more relationships, and we have seen partnership with other churches local. We still have quite a few that come from out of state or out of the area that come in to help do work, but we try to go towards helping with vacation Bible schools if they need help in those churches. I'm a pastor of one of the local churches. Chad, another staff member of ours, they're youth ministers at another one of the local churches, a different one. We have another guy on staff who's a pastor at another local church. And we just had Brother T at Psalmist Porch took on a pastorate in Cumberland at a local church. So we're already in 4 different churches just with our staff. We tried not to clump up together in one church, but to spread out, amongst churches to be able to do ministry work. So I think that answers your question. But what I would say is initially it was a little difficult. And we were trying to also see what God was wanting us to do, but then to establish a consistency that you're here to help. You're not here for gain. And once you establish that and know that people know that you care about them and want to serve them, then it helps with a lot of relationships from that point forward. And honest, and even for me, I sit on the board with the Tri-City Little League. I coach a Little League baseball team. I'm a chaplain of the football team for Letcher County, and then I coach the middle school baseball team with one of my sons on that team. And even just in these past 5 years, it's been amazing to see the opportunities they've developed even for in those areas of ministry and the connection with other churches, local churches too. So.
I may be the only one who doesn't know what exactly is the equine therapy.
Okay, so there's equine therapy, and then there's the equine ministry side. So on the equine therapy side of that, which would be in the video some, is where you can use horses to work with special needs children. Usually for us, it's higher functioning autism, but really like going back to just living a life of response. Whatever it is, whoever it is that God brings to you, how can you minister to that family right then in that moment? And so it has become a popular thing to use with higher functioning children with autism is equine. You can get certified in all those things, and we're not. We don't proclaim to be, but we do know how to care for the horse. We've been teaching lessons for 20 years. So we just take the child with consulting with the parent, and then say, okay, well, we can offer this. And so we mesh those, and we just love on that child. And you can bring in some therapists with that try to help stimulate speaking to further that or grow that deeper, or even some body muscle postures type things as well. And those are good things as well. But I would say that's probably only really a 10% of what we do. The rest of that 90% is working just with your everyday school child of your local elementary schools to your high school age. So, and we do an after-school program on Tuesdays and Thursdays for ages 12 and older. The bus will drop the kids off. We work them through a level 1 and level 2 of horsemanship. And then we do a Bible study on Tuesdays. They help us clean stalls and put up hay, fix fences, and it's all free for them to come and be a part of this. And then that group, core group, is also who helps us put the camp on, because they know our horses by that point. So when the camps come for the equine side, they help us do the grooming and tack, they help us do the saddling, and then also the riding and getting kids on and off horses and so forth. So basically, what you're asking is we use horses for opportunity to share the gospel in a controlled, safe way. Does that answer that? All right. Any other questions?
Do you have many groups that come in, like on a mission trip?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So like what your church got to do, I think we were saying that was 5 years ago, roughly, in that ballpark. A lot of the facilities we have and the maintenance of those facilities have been because of mission teams that have come through and helped. So we may have 2,000 people from different churches, churches of groups of 15 or churches groups of 10 or some with groups of like 65 that will schedule a time throughout. Usually summer's the peak of that when school's out. They'll start coming in March, like when spring breaks start, and they'll go through about October when fall breaks end. And so they'll come through and we will assign them according to skill set to projects and to helping with camps or feeding people or whatever the needs are. And when you have 20 staff members and we have probably 10 facilities or more, it's a lot of maintenance, and the teams have been a huge encouragement to our staff to continue to be able to minister, and not just, we could spend all of our time fixing leaky roofs, you know. But the involvement of the mission teams really help to tackle a lot of that stuff so we can stay focused on the people. That's the priority, are the people. So we do, yes, so we do have teams. There's actually one there now. It's a Triad Church. It's out of North Carolina. They're staying on the farm. And they worked yesterday, they're working today, and then I think they're worshiping tomorrow on the farm, and then they're heading home. So they did 2 days. And that one was like a men's group, but we have all kinds. We don't have an age limit, so we have even young children that will come and participate. Now, it limits the team when you have a child because of the skill set, and someone's got to watch the child, but how do you not know that you could be working with the next Billy Graham with these children that come, so why would you tell them no, you know? So we just slow down the pace and let them be a part of what missions looks like. So you're trying to do something bigger than the moment and looking to your church for the future, also from Rizzo Center to the future too, of just investment and discipleship. Any other questions? All right. Tomorrow we'll pick back up with this in the morning, but it'll be a different text that we're going to look at. We're going to look in Matthew chapter 6, where we'll go tomorrow. But I'll hand it back over to Pastor Andy.